In this segment, we're going to take the XML we've already produced, read it, and parse it with JavaScript. You'll remember we created the XML, and what I've done is I've surrounded it with this particular JavaScript just to put it in a variable called XML. So basically, we take all of the lines of JavaScript and we put it in this XML variable. Now, there's other ways to load the XML. You can use, for example, Ajax. But for those of you who don't have a server, I don't want you to run into what's called a cross-site scripting problem. So we're doing it this way. There's other ways you can do it, but don't worry too much about those right now. So first thing we want to do in our HTML is, before we actually write our own script, is to load the script that's got the music in it. So we're going to use script source equals music.js. What that's going to do is that's going to load this code and put it right there where my cursor is flashing. So that's what it'll look like in the browser's memory or the browser's DOM. So here in the script, we're going to want to take that music, that file, that XML, and parse it and use it. So I'm going to start setting up like this. I'm going to create here a window onload event that responds with this particular function. So this function will load when the window loads. And we're going to create a parser. Every modern browser has a parser. So we're just going to call it parser equals new DOM parser. And the DOM parser is what's going to allow us to parse within the memory that particular document, that particular XML. All right, so now we'll say our XML document equals, and we're going to use the parser, and then we're going to use the parse from string command. And first we're going to parse the actual variable, which is called XML. Remember, it's right here. So we're going to parse that content, and we're going to parse it with the MIME type text/XML. So treating it as traditional XML text. Once we've got that, then we can actually start parsing our data. So I'm going to go ahead and put here console log XML document. That's going to just log out to the console, if we have a console in our browser, the XML itself. All right, so let's try this in Firefox. All right, let's go to the console. And there you can see we've got this document thing. And if I click on the document, it'll tell me all about the document. Well, I can tell you that that document is the XML document, but it's not quite useful to us yet. We want that XML document to be broken down into an array of these composition nodes. So here's the first element, the second element. So these can be all stored in an array. And this way we can loop through them and get the information out of each and every node, which is exactly what we want to do. So instead of just getting the XML document, let's go ahead and comment that out right there. We want the XML documents. First of all, we want to go through this node right here, which is called the root node or the document node. And then we want to go and get the array of composition elements. So we're going to use document element, which is JavaScript for the root node, and then we're going to use get elements by tag name composition. Now that's going to return this array of elements. So let's go ahead here and call this elements array. And let's again console log. I like to test pretty frequently to make sure that this is doing what I think I'm doing. If I go too many steps without testing and I make a mistake, that mistake becomes very difficult to find. All right, so let's go ahead and bring up our friend Firefox again, open the console, we'll refresh, and this time we get an HTML collection. Composition, 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 composition. So these are all the nodes, and you can see here it's structured in memory as XML. So that's exactly what we want. Now for each node, we want to get the title, composer, time, and file name so we can output that information. So it's in the elements array. That's what we want to loop through. So of course we're going to use here, we can use a for loop or a while loop. I'm going to use a for loop. For var I equals 0, I is less than elements array, I++. Now before I actually use this loop, I'm going to change one thing. This should be elements array dot length, which tells us the length of the array. But I'm actually going to take this out of here and create a length variable like that. And the reason I'm going to do that is because that simply performs better. Now, it wouldn't matter for our little array here, but if we had thousands and thousands of elements, that is not going to perform well here inside the loop, because each time through the loop, it would have to count the elements, see at the length. We don't want to do that. We want to count it once. So I created what's called a sentinel. So now each time through, we want to get from the elements array and I will give us first time the 0th element. So first time through, it'll be this one, then 1, then 2, etc., to go all the way through the array. So from the elements array I'm going to get elements by tag name. And looking at what we got here, we're going to get, first of all, the title. Now, get elements by tag name, so notice it's get elements with an S, also returns an array. So we need to do sub-0, since we know there's only one title element in each composition. And then we need to actually get first child node value. Now, I know that seems confusing. Let me see if I can explain it. So here, get elements by tag name title 0. Let's say we're on the first element. That's going to get us this whole element. Now, we want to get this text inside. This text inside is considered the first child of the element. So from there, we get the first child, and then we get the node value, which gives us the actual text. Now, just to make sure we're doing this right, again, I'm going to console log, and let's go ahead and call this the title, like that. So then we'll console log the title, and what we should see in the console, unless I've made some type of error, is the titles to all of the compositions. Oops, let's get the console, and there we go. O mio babino caro, the man I love, etc. All of these from the XML. So now getting the rest of the elements, the composer, time, and file name, is pretty much the same thing. So the composer, still elements array, sub I, that tells us which composition element we're on, get elements by tag name, and this time we want the composer, still sub-0 because there's only one, first child dot node value. All right, great. So now the last two that we need to get are time and file name. Let me use a little copy and paste to speed this up a little bit. That's going to be time, that's going to be file name, so we'll make the change in both places. This also has to be time and file name because this is the actual name in the XML. These variable names over here are arbitrary. They could be anything you want. I decided to give them the same name as the element in the XML just to make it a little bit easier. Once again, just as a test, I'm going to console log out all of these items. So title, then a space, and then composer, time, and file name. So then we'll have composer, time, and file name. This way we can make sure we're getting all of them accurately. So now back here, refresh. Oh, looks like we've got an error there on line 21. So let's take a look. Get elements by tag name 0 is undefined. File name, get elements array I, get elements by tag name file name. And capitalization is not consistent. I used a lowercase n in the XML, so all we've got to do is change it right there. And we could change it here as well, but I don't have to. And let's try it again. See, that error would have been much harder to find if we had waited longer. All right, good. So now we got the title, the composer, the time, and the MP3 file name. All right, so now we want to go ahead and output this information so the user can see it. Obviously, the user can't see the console, so we'll comment that out right here. Now, what I like to do is I like to make a little table to output these. So I think I'll create a variable here called output, and we'll assign that initially the opening table tag. Some people think you can't use tables anymore. You certainly can for this type of tabular information. It's exactly what they're for these types of kind of charts. All right, so now output plus equals, and we're going to do a table row tag. And then we're going to do a table data tag. And let's go ahead and let's do this like this. Put this in parentheses. Table data plus title. And if you're familiar with HTML tables, you can kind of see exactly what I'm doing here. Composer. That should be a closing and opening tag here. So close, reopen, just like that. So this should be a close and a reopen. So we're closing the composer cell, and we're opening the time cell. And again, close the time cell, open the file name cell, spelling it like I did in my variable, and then closing the table data cell. Now, without any CSS, this table is not going to look terrific by any means, but it'll give us an organized way to display the data. So output plus equals, we'll close the table row, and then after the loop, we'll close the table. So output plus equals table. Now that we've got that, we can say document get element by ID result. That's the name of the div I have down here just to hold the result of all this work. Dot inner HTML equals output. All right, so now if we did everything right, we should see results outside the console. So let's go ahead and refresh. Oh, looks like we've got a typo there on line 23, misspelled output. This type of thing happens when you're programming. And now on 25, wow, I'm spelling it all sorts of ways here. Problem's not so much the spelling, it's the typing. There we go. So now we've got title, composer, we've got the time, and the file name. So now we're reading our XML, and we're able to output the actual XML data.